the other one, you bastard!
Brought to you by Totes. More information in a moment.
I have not been into the trajectory of Fanstoys for quite some time. They are by no means a bad company, they've got their finger on the pulse on what their fans want, even if their crowd can be a little bit overzealous at times. Not really Fanstoys' fault on that, every niche has its weirdos. I tend to joke about third-party engineering where they overcomplicate things since they don't have a great grasp on how to do conversions simply but effectively, but with a few key exceptions, Fanstoys tends to be alright on this front. Sure, the transformations are simply a means to an end, a tactic I'm not too crazy on, but hey, it's what their fans want. Usually their figures are built well and are painted to the ends of the earth, so in terms of what they're trying to do, they do a bang-up job. Thing is, that doesn't tend to match up with my own personal preference. They typically go hard into the Sunbow designs, and while I'm typically okay with G1 aesthetics, Sunbow models are very hit or miss for me. I'll take Sunbow Megatron and Pipes any day of the week, but for stuff like Huffer, oh boy, that looks fugly. Well, it looks fugly from my perspective. Obviously they're giving their fans what they want, so I can't fault them for that. That said, it's hard to call a lot of what they put out the definitive version of the character when they're appealing to one particular niche. Stuff like Crimson Wings works because the majority are looking for at least some semblance of Sunbow adherence, but for a lot of characters, different people want different things. That said, it's often difficult to please everyone. You can't always release toon and toy versions of a character, since the sales may not always be there. So there has to be a solution, right? There has to be a way to satisfy multiple groups of third-party and Masterpiece fans. It can't just stay like this, can it? Well, allow me to present what I think is the perfect solution to this problem. Greetings, Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to Fanstoys Soundwave, also known as Robot Paradise Acoustic Wave. Yeah, Fanstoys pulled a transform element and created a fake company to release this. Of course this fooled no one, as this design's been floating around since the days of Quake Wave, only to get cancelled so as not to clash with the Takara release. Jesus, that was almost 10 years ago. This design is really old school, ain't it? But enough of that, I'm really getting off topic here. This version of Soundwave turns into, essentially, a box. I don't particularly get what you're expecting here. It's a masterpiece alike that attempts to recreate the G1 alt mode. If you're hoping for something a bit more dynamic, you're in the wrong place, buddy. That said, as a recreation of the old micro cassette player, they've actually made quite a few sacrifices. The first thing you'll notice when looking at it is the proportional dissonance. You take a look at most G1 or G1 adjacent sound waves and you'll notice that they're all fairly wide and fairly thin. The reasoning is pretty obvious. The original device was just like this. Fanstoys Soundwave is not this. This is a pretty wide and chunky Hey! Stop that! We've already overused that joke too much. Come back in a few episodes when it's fresh again. But yes, to account for the robot mode transformation, this mode has been widened quite a bit on the Z- axis. Now, personally, I get it. They've got to account for the chunkier legs somehow. Besides, the Sunbow model was a smidge wider than an actual cassette player anyway, so some leeway can be given. Not this much leeway, but definitely some. It may end up bothering some people, but I'm personally okay with it, since the alternative is an overcomplicated transformation on the level of MP44 or 52, which thankfully this doesn't fall into the trappings of. What's less understandable is some of the panel jank. This transformation is by no means a panel-y mess, but the end result ends up looking pretty close to one. From the front it looks clean as a whistle, as most Soundwaves do, but towards the back, oh boy, hinges galore on the top, barely being covered up by the shoulder armor, weird bits on the side overlapping like a poorly aligned tarp, whatever the is going on back here. It doesn't really feel masterpiecey in the aesthetic department. It's not hateful, but on a $300 figure, it's definitely something that sticks out like a sore thumb, or I guess a sore panel. At first, I assumed this was due to the fact that this figure was a fairly older design, and Fanstoys hadn't quite figured out how to engineer it properly at the time. As mentioned earlier, this design has been in the works since at least the Quake Wave days, but taking a look at those original renders, these are not the same toy. They either scrapped the design and started over, or heavily reworked it into what it is today, either of which probably happened around 2019 when they announced this as a Fanstoys release.
I'm not
Fanstoys.
Yeah. He says he's not.
Fanstoys.
Yes, he is. I'm not.
Whatever the case though, that doesn't explain why this is so messy, nor does it excuse this. Now you can make it look a bit better by adding these back panels, which aren't parts forming, don't worry. They're for the toy likeness, and they stay on during transformation. Still, there's only so much they can do. Ultimately though, those are the only real issues I can think of. They're issues that might bother extreme alt mode accuracy buffs, but from my perspective, this is a dumb alt mode anyway, so who cares? Dumb in an endearing way, that is. And that's not to say this alt mode has no fantastic qualities. For starters, it's painted to the ends of the earth, as I've said earlier. Practically every surface is either coated in paint or covered in a metallic finish. It's also surprisingly durable too. A few corners out of the box had a few scratches, but I'm sure that's just courtesy of the QC gremlin. Not the worst thing I've had recently. Even the chrome gold on the front is durable as look, which is quite rare for chromed pieces. Massive kudos here, and massive kudos for being so tasteful. It's very easy to go overboard and make chrome seem gaudy. This is just used to highlight the trims. It works incredibly well. Now you might think the buttons are chromed as well, but nope. These are actually genuine metal, covered in a gloss finish to bring out their shininess. I've seen a lot of complaints about these, claiming it makes the alt mode look cheap. My view is the complete opposite though. I think these look way better than any chrome piece could ever look. It's also all over the place too, being used on the eject button on the top as well as the sliders on the side, both of which have full functionality. Sadly, the buttons don't press though, although I do get it. This is prioritizing the aesthetic over play functions. It's a display piece more than a play piece, even if it ends up being actually pretty fun to transform. Not sure they could have engineered spring-loaded buttons properly with such a tiny panel anyway. And that's not all the diecast either. This figure has to be at least 40% metal with how heavy it is. No joke, this thing is heavier than Freedom Leader. Even if it wasn't coated from head to toe in paint, the sheer weight of this thing would easily account for the $300 price tag. Beyond that, you get some nice detail on the front too. It's a pretty much one-to-one recreation of the Sunbow detail, and the only liberties they've taken are to facilitate the transformation hinges. It might be a little less than most non-Masterpiece fans are used to, but it's still enough to get the job done. So in the end, yes, it's got a bit of jank in the trunk, but I cannot deny this is a wonderfully crafted micro cassette player. As briefly touched on earlier, the sacrifices made are to facilitate the transformation. It's simple and enjoyable, which is something I can't really say for most Masterpiece releases. It's sized well for what you're paying, although obviously it'll never scale properly with anything. It's painted extremely well, built phenomenally, and works as a cool display piece if you really want to keep it in this mode. Of course, as a cassette player, I'd say the alternative is a much better display option. But hey, you do you, and if you want to do that, it works, I suppose. Now, for the accessories that apply to this particular mode, you don't get much. The batteries store on the back, which is a lovely nod to the G1 toy. Also, so glad you don't have to store them on the bottom to keep the back upright. I know that's a thing mostly associated with the Legends versions, but it's still a relief to see. As mentioned earlier, you can plug on the leg pieces on the back, but that's primarily for the robot mode, so I'll discuss that later. You can also plug in an alternate window for a clearer pane and for greater accuracy to both the show and the original device. Personally, I like the extra detail in both modes though. Finally, as is customary with Masterpiece-alike Soundwaves, he comes with one cassette, whilst the others are packed separately. Well, I suppose customary might be a stretch since there are only 2 Masterpiece versions on the market at present, 3 if you count the mercenary fucker, but you get the idea. In this set, they've opted to go with Frenzy. If you're confused, I'm talking about the red one. You may call him Rumble. Good for you. People can call the Cassette Bros whatever they like. It's your collection and your rules. As for the choice itself, I'm a smidge annoyed. Personally, I think Laserbeak or Ravage would have been more appropriate, but I totally get it. From a marketing perspective, they want people to buy as many products as possible. By putting the most desirable parts in a separate pack, they're guaranteeing more sales. Is it anti-consumer? Probably. Is it a shit thing to do? Possibly. Will it result in more money for the company? Absolutely. And ultimately, that's all that matters to them. That said, it's not particularly fair to put all that contextual baggage on this poor fellow. How does he fare on his own? Well, he's a bit wibbly in this mode. From a build quality perspective, this thing is insane. It's gone from 40% die-cast metal to roughly 90%. That's bananas, and it explains why the 2-pack costs 2/3 of the price of the main figure. Beyond that, in terms of the sheer quantity of paint, they've gone all out. This thing is covered in paint and tamper graphs. Really glad they didn't skimp out on these. Unfortunately, when it comes to the application, they've been real sloppy with them. Look at this shit. This is ridiculous! I've applied repro label sets better than this nonsense. And if that wasn't bad enough, they kinda f***ed up with the tampos on the sides. Thanks to lack of clearance, these tend to chip as you slot the cassettes in and out of the deck. Real bummer, the main bot had such durable paint. This just isn't up to the same standards. Now, you're never going to notice these issues if you leave the cassette in the chest the whole time, which I recommend doing anyway since it gives the window some nice extra detail. But it's still something I should have taken into account. That's not my biggest gripe though. No, that would have to be the size. Frenzy and the other tapes are purposefully a millimeter shorter in their width compared to traditional Masterpiece cassettes. And as such, you can't use your existing cassettes alongside this release. I know what they're doing here, I can see what they're doing, and I don't like it. From a business perspective, it makes sense, or at least about as much sense as the cassette choice. That said, other cassettes from other companies in the past have been MP compatible, so in comparison, it really just makes Fanstoys seem stingy. I can't say it didn't work given my decision to buy the pack, which was one of the worst decisions I made during the run of 2021, but it's still pretty clearly a stingy choice on the company's part. Oh well, if it pisses you off, I suppose you can pack Frenzy up in his cassette case and forget he ever existed. And jokes aside, it's not enough to write this entire mode off. Ultimately, the cassette kerfuffle, although very noticeable, doesn't ruin the base figure. It's a solid micro cassette player, and I can't think of anything that would turn you off the entire package. Although this mode isn't why I went in on this. The ultimate question relies on this. what do these two figures have in common? Well, after a quick transformation, let's take a look at the answer. After a quick Shill moment. Today's video was brought to you by Robotoys, one of Australia's leading Transformers retailers. If you're looking for mainline, selects, masterpiece, knockoffs, or third party, they've got you covered. Unfortunately, due to external circumstances and the marathon I was working on, this review came out a little late, and as such, Acoustic Wave is sold out. But at the time of writing, you can still grab the cassettes. But hey, they've got tons of other Fanstoys releases lined up, and if you want 10% off and haven't used the special code already, make sure to use the code DrLockdown 10% off at the checkout. It'll work really well on those Fanstoys releases because they're expensive. Anywho, enough of that. We've got some conversions to get into. Tally ho! As mentioned earlier, one of my biggest gripes with a lot of third-party transformations is that they're needlessly complicated. I'm not talking like Crimson Wings, where the transformation is a journey in itself, where the complicated transformation is the point. I'm talking more like MP62, where it's just the means to an end and there's way too many steps that accomplish basically nothing. Where every step fights against you, where it's supposed to look perfect in each mode because you're never going to transform it. It's just going to sit on the shelf forever. This version of Soundwave doesn't do that, thankfully. As seen with the back of the alt mode, it's messy here, and that's the point. They've sacrificed the alt mode so the transformation can be fun and enjoying. And I massively respect that. I would much rather take sacrifices to the vehicle mode over sacrifices to the transformation. A transformer is 3 parts: the alt mode, the robot mode, and the journey between. And too often I see companies making massive sacrifices on the journey just so it looks good. So this is right up my alley, and I really appreciate it. That said, we better do Frenzy first, so we gotta get him out of there. Frenzy's transformation is not good. It's not awful, but it's just amateurish. Compared to the main robot, it feels like a different designer worked on this. I mean, it doesn't even hold together that well. You try wobbling it around and it's just gonna fall apart because there's no tabs here, it's just tolerances. That's amateurish. As a Legends aficionado who loves small-scale transformations, this is just not up to par with what we have these days. Of course, you can see the first step in the transformation we're supposed to get, but actually, to access it, it's always good to get the waist all the way out. You need to get it as far out as you can get it. Might look like it's fine there, but actually it just goes a little bit further up like that. And no, that's not to access any articulation, it's just the way it works. Anywho, what you want to do is push the leg in and rotate it around. At least that's how it's supposed to work. A lot of copies don't function this way. Apparently, due to the molding of the die cast, sometimes these bits are buckled and you have to disassemble it and bend it into place just so you can get the legs out. That's absurd. The QC on this thing is Anywho, you push the foot out and you try to get this tiny little heel spur out of there. There's not a lot of room, but you finally get it out of there. What's the purpose of getting the foot out? None. It doesn't really do anything. God, compared to the Masterpiece cassette, this is just atrocious. Anywho, much like the G1 cassette, these bits actually rotate around and then around like so. Nice engineering callback, but it leaves the shoulders down. Why do my shoulders hurt? And you bring the fists out like so. Come to the head and try to get it out and rotate the head around into place, and we're done. Disappointing cassette robot with a disappointing transformation. Who would have thunk it? Fortunately, Soundwave himself is infinitely better. Like, this is probably top 5 Soundwave transformations, hands down. It's just brilliant. First thing you want to do is come around to the back, and you will need to take out the guns from the battery compartment. The transformation will not function properly if they're still in there. Bit of a bummer that the storage doesn't work between modes, but at least you can put them back in the robot mode. And this already does a lot, and it already does a great transformation. Now, the toy-styled leg panels can stay on during the transformation, but the connections are a little bit loose. So I'll be taking them off just so I can display the 2 types of transformations you can do here. After this video, I'll probably just glue them on, because you can do it without parts forming, which I greatly appreciate. Anywho, the first thing you want to do is come around here and start bringing these side panels down. This will start to unlock all of the doodads. This panel will unslide from there, and you can actually pull it out of it because this double hinge also slides a bit as well. It just rotates around onto the side like so. And this is the only real bit of paint chipping on the entire robot. A bit of paint chipping on this because this is actually a chromed piece instead of metal. Would have loved it to have been actual metal, but this entire piece is already metal, so it's a bit difficult to do so. Anywho, rotate this bit into the leg like so. Start getting the same setup on the other side by rotating around and rotating down. Come to the top and separate these top shoulder pieces, like so. And then one of my biggest gripes with the transformation, which is very similar to the toy side panels, these bits always fall off. See, we've got swappable panels on the shins, which are supposed to stay on during transformation, but they don't. So that's another bit I'm gonna have to glue in. Fantastic. Still, if you like one or the other, it's a minor issue, I suppose. You'll notice these bits kind of rotate from the outsides there. It'll just kind of do its thing. Maybe we'll just take this panel and separate it on its double hinge there so we get a bit more clearance. Nice and easy, very nice. And perhaps it's good to start with the feet too. These bits untab from there and rotate around like so, and then peg into the feet there. Nice and solidly, works really well, nice and simple. Don't need a billion steps for the feet, right, Starscream? And just so we don't forget, let's just bring down the shoulder panels here. You'll notice at the bottom we got panels here on the leg cavity things here, whatever they're supposed to be, and then you can separate them from there, which will give us a lot more clearance for the rest of it. It looks like a nightmare, but trust me, it's not. Come around to the front and start rotating these down all the way. Come around to the bottom and rotate these legs into place, and they actually lock into place like so. I don't know why they've got this locking mechanism here, because there's a separate thigh swivel on top of that at the actual thigh here. I'm guessing it's for aesthetics, but that thigh swivel cut would have been fine, I think, personally. But hey, it's what they wanted to do. And now the legs can go all the way down like so. You pull out this panel here. That will give you enough clearance to come inside, bring out this panel, rotate in this extra panel, and fold it down into place. And then this little knee cavity folds up into there. So now it's got a nice, solid knee section. You have to pull this part up first so that we get the clearance here. Otherwise, it won't really work. And then it's back in like so. Yay! Now, there's two different ways this works. If you're using the toon-styled parts, it basically just folds in on itself like so. However, if you're using the toy-styled parts, you basically fold it in the same as you would, but you've got this extra panel here, which means you'll need to rotate this section around and it pegs into place. It's nice that they were able to do it for both, and you can do whatever leg style you like. But personally, I prefer the toy-styled leg, so that's what I'm gonna go with. Anywho, you wanna bring this section down, rotate these panels in like so. One of them rotated in by accident already. Rotate these in like so. Come on, in you go. Rotate this panel back here, and then let's get the arms out of the way so that we can do the rest. Untab the arms from the sides here. Come around to the sides, and they tab in really, really tightly. The first couple of times you're gonna do it, you're gonna need some real force on it. It feels like you're gonna break the damn thing, but trust me, it'll get there eventually. And now the waist needs to rotate around quite a few times. You wanna bring this section back and open up this section like so, fold in this section underneath, and we'll leave that up just for the time being so we get a bit more clearance at the waist. Come to the bottom and rotate this section out, then this section will rotate upwards like so. There's two different swivels, so you take the bottom one down like so, and then that will allow you to fold this section into place like so. Come around to the front, and you can actually pull this section up with the waist. Thankfully, it's much more sturdy than Frenzy, but then you can bring this section down, pegs into place there, and you peg in that little nub at the bottom there too. And that's what locks this into place, although you still do get a bit of wiggle there, unfortunately. Then you bring down these double hinged side skirts, rotate the entire waist around, and yes, it's a lot of waist transformation sections. A mate of mine actually forgot to flip the waist section around. In fact, I think out of the box, it's got the fake one at the back here, so you might need to rotate it around, otherwise it looks a little bit weird. And yes, faux parts, oh no, who cares? Anywho, you come around to the arms, you've got this little panel here, opens up, the fist rotates out and like so, and closes up. Sort of a little spin on the old Masterpiece type hand. I usually prefer the fist to be located in the top part here. Feels more sturdy, but this gets the job done. Finally, last but not least, before you open this up, you bring out the head like so, out you go, and then this part rotates down into the back and like so, and with that bit extra there, you get the extra waist and the extra ab crunch. Come on, extra ab crunch, there we go, and we're almost done. We just got the guns left. For the main gun, it pulls itself out, the handle flips out like so. Unfortunately, you have to get your fingernails on the chrome, which is really bad, but once that's done, that'll just fit in there later. And last but not least, this bit is supposed to come out on this, but it's completely useless. You can just stick it on there normally. It's kind of weird. And that's your Soundwave. It's a really fun transformation, all things considered. It's not the sort of transformation often associated with Fanstoys or with third party in general when it comes to the Masterpiece scale. I will happily take sacrificed alt modes if these are the types of transformations I see going forward. I know I'm in the minority on that because it has to be a display piece, but this is great. I don't care what anyone says, I had fun with this, and I want them to keep it up. I know they won't, but a man can dream, can't he? Even before seeing the robot mode, the general messiness of the micro cassette player clues you into the fact that this version prioritizes robot mode aesthetic in the end. Sure, that messiness is amplified so as not to make the transformation a nightmare, but this release pretty definitively occupies the same space as figures like Freedom Leader and DX9 Gavolt. As a result, this is just pure sex. It's a wonderfully crafted robot mode in both design and aesthetics. In fact, getting this right out the way, I'd say this is better than the original Masterpiece in practically every way. Sadly, due to external circumstances, I don't have access to my copy of Masterpiece Soundwave for precise comparisons, but take my word for it. Now, out of the box, Soundwave won't exactly look like this. He's got two separate loadouts, Toon and Toy, and the former is the default option. That said, I'm going to start off and primarily focus on the toy look, because that's personally what I bought it for, and from my perspective, it presents this figure's strengths and weaknesses far more effectively. That aside, once again, the presentation is absolutely on point. The head sculpt perfectly captures the toy design. It would have been nice to have swappable eyepieces so you could get red or yellow on either of them, but that probably would have been a logistical nightmare, so I get why they didn't. Now, because of the way the face unpegs, you do get a weird gap between the two white side parts, but honestly, I think this looks pretty good. It provides a nice level of visual interest without too much blue drowning out the head back here, and beyond that, the angles on this thing are insane. You can really see where the designers got the idea for the Decepticon symbol with this. Also, the yellow paint is applied perfectly here, which is always commendable given it's the hardest color to do on the planet. The awesome paint applications don't stop there either. He's practically covered from head to toe in premium application. Aside from the fact that every surface is coated in a luscious and highly durable flex finish, one that still remains subtle enough so as not to fall down the same abyss as Zeta RC, almost every major portion has its own tasteful extras. The shoulders get multi-layered throwbacks to the original G1 toy stickers, not identical, but enough to get the cues across. The elbow hinges wear their die-cast heritage loud and proud, as do the hip skirts. Yes, despite being faux pas, they retain the glossy metal idea from the alt mode. It's an idea so good they had to do it twice. You've got metallic red on the forearms and knee pieces, and the lower legs are absolutely gorgeous. I love the extra bits and bobbles, mimicking the G1 stickers in all the right ways. They even took a few wonderful liberties that give it that extra oomph in the end, such as picking out the pistons in silver. They were just bare blue plastic on the original, so this is a very nice touch. And whilst on the topic of the legs, I simply adore the proportions. The best way to describe it would be the Quakewave effect, where they exaggerate the torso and lower legs ever so slightly to make this guy feel Oi! What did I say about that joke? Sorry about that. As I was saying, the Quakewave effect is something that makes third-party Decepticons feel way more menacing. You really feel the giant robot essence in these designs. And I love how it's made its return here. That essence may cause a few problems later, but for toy styling fans, I imagine it'll go down really well. Of course, this proportional idea works wonders in tandem with the returning torso design. I still find it amazing how the chrome works so well here. It's so easy to fuck up chrome pieces, yet they've done a fantastic job. Also, one thing I really didn't notice until another reviewer pointed it out. None of the screws are visible from the front. The designers have purposefully hidden all of them so that they're only visible from the back. Apparently this is something Fanstoys does quite often, and although it's not the craziest thing ever, nor the most uncommon, gotta say, nice touch. But that's just the looks department, which is only half the triumphant story. You wanna talk about builds? Please let me talk about builds. This shit is insane! Most of the diecast has migrated to the legs, which allows this guy to balance insanely well. In fact, this might just be the best use of diecast I've seen on a Transformer period, and that's ignoring the wonderful idea to use exposed pieces for actual metal. The plastic is also beefy as f. From what I can gather, a lot of third-party Masterpiece figures seem to be cheaping out on plastic these days. I can't confirm, since I've only had limited experience with friends' copies, as they tend to stick to the Hasbro stuff, for better or for worse. At least it's better than Crimson Wings though, and I can 100% firm it's better than anything Hasbro Masterpiece has put out lately, even counting the rare good ones. And then you get to the articulation. Holy f. This is insane. It's not the level of articulation that gets me excited. It's how it's achieved. Most of the load-bearing joints on this thing are ratcheted, but not just your pansy-ass normal ratchets. These things are as chunky as a Cybertron figure, as in a Galaxy Force Cybertron one, with their perfect click size ensuring they work in any pose and the sheer chunkitude as you move them. It's a symphony of clickety joy. This puts it in an interesting position, because lately I've seen quite a few people complaining about lacking articulation on Fanstoys figures. This might seem odd to the uninformed, since he's pretty much got everything you could want, right? Well, given the current trajectory of third party, a lot of people have been asking for more these days. Butterfly joints, deeper ab crunches, more rotation. Soundwave does not have these. And if you're asking for such, you might be a little disappointed. Personally, they aren't something I typically go crazy for, especially when their implementation causes the transformation to be a goddamn nightmare. But this may turn some Fanstoys fans off. That said, if you're like me and the sheer fluidity of the posing power is your kind of jam, then don't worry, it's not going to make your shoulder shoulders hurt. You're going to love this figure. It's actually really hard to find faults with this figure, at least in the toy loadouts. I can only think of two, and they're ultimately so minor that they're basically inconsequential. Firstly, due to the sliding rail on the inside, Soundwave's hips sway just a smidge. Not as much as that one cropped pornography meme, but definitely enough that you'll occasionally notice it. It's a very rare thing to cross your minds though, since the sheer weight of the torso keeps it in the middle most of the time. Secondly, the shoulder cannon flips back for some reason, leaving this odd gap. Not sure why it extends like this, it's basically pointless. You can pretty much leave it closed anyway, so why they did this? I don't know. It's not even a shared part with the arm cannons, so, yeah, just leave it folded up. No reason not to. That just leaves the hips, so yeah, this guy is pretty close to perfect in the end. As a toy-styled Soundwave with modern proportions, articulation, and paint is basically everything you could ask for. With the core robot, there's insanely little to get annoyed about. But I guess they had to f*** up somewhere, so let's discuss why the accessories might leave something to be desired. Of course, you get the shoulder cannon mentioned earlier, and it's got all the paint you could want, thankfully. My favorite part is the rotation, though. It makes photography so much easier, since you can see the head in a lot more poses now. I've only ever seen this on one other Soundwave, so going forward, I'd love to see this become the general standard. You also get the other battery gun, and this one is slightly less well crafted. You've got to pull the barrel out into place, and annoyingly, this is chromed plastic instead of bare metal. I get why they did this. The gun needs to be light enough for him to hold, and metal would, well, not be that. Still, I'm always scared I'm going to chip this every time I convert it. Flipping out from underneath would have been a much better option, or even having the chassis move instead like the Magic Square version. But alas, no other company seems to try such. The metallic red is also pretty lax, with a lot of blue bleeding from underneath. No idea why, the rest of the body does it damn well. But ultimately, it's just a gun. Nobody should get angry over something that simple. No, the most controversial part of this set would be the swappable parts. As briefly alluded to earlier, Soundwave follows in the footsteps of Iron Factory Megatron, offering different loadouts for different versions. You get a replacement face, a flatter transparent pane as discussed in the cassette player mode, 2 shoulder pieces, 2 tibiofemoral covers, 2 knee plates, and 2 shin plates. You've also got 2 calf thickeners, but they don't really replace anything. They sort of just sit on the outside, doing exactly what the descriptor says. Swapping out the parts is fairly simple. The only real frustrating section is the window piece, which is ridiculously tight. A concern for the longevity of the clear plastic. You probably won't be doing this conversion too often though, so I can't imagine it'll be too annoying. Also, just one quick thing to do with swapping out the window module. I didn't realize until I was filming it, but there's actually a specific way you're supposed to do it, which makes it a lot easier. So if you take a look at the pane, it's not actually a complete rectangle. There are slight diagonal cutouts on the bottom here. So if you try to do it this way, it's going to get stuck on the hard corners here, whereas if you do it this way, it's nice and curved. So as long as you do it like that, it actually fits in pretty easily. It's not something I really noticed until I really scrutinized it, so just keep it in mind. In its supposed tune mode though, this seems off. Just looking at this, something doesn't feel right. It's gone from a design filled with life to a pale imitation made by a lesser third-party company, except that this isn't a lesser company, this is Fanstoys. So what exactly is going on here? Now, sarcastic commenters will be quick to post, "Well, it's because it's G1 accurate and those designs are boring as shit anyway!" But that's not really the case. When done right, Sumbo designs can feel like they jumped right off the screen, using careful sculpt work to embody the characters to the fullest. This doesn't really do that, and Fanstoys' die-hard fanbase have noticed. Average collectors have been praising this quite a bit, whereas Fanstoys aficionados have been quite critical of this release. After taking a closer look between the toy and the screen model, I think I found the answer. It's not that it's tune accurate, but rather that it isn't. There's an unfortunate proportional dissonance going on between the ideas from the flat tune aesthetic and the leftovers from the chunkier toy stylings. The torso is much wider than the Sunbow version, whilst the shoulders are far too angled. His legs are much wider than the original, but without the toy pieces on the sides to make it purposeful, it seems like a half measure, and as a result, it just looks off. Doesn't help that the head has a slight case of third-party face either. This example doesn't really have any points I can draw attention to. I'm not particularly sure why it looks off, but something about it just does. Might be the lack of roundness. G1 Cartoon Soundwave is a much softer design than his micro-change brethren. It doesn't have the same angles, a necessity for drawing the model in a shorter time frame, sure, but as a result, it doesn't feel like Cartoon Soundwave. Like, take a look at this shot from Season 3. Look how tumbly and wholesome this looks. This doesn't look like that. It's definitely Soundwave, but it's not the Soundwave Fanstoys fans are specifically looking for. The question remains, why, or I suppose how, did Soundwave end up this way? Well, as per usual, whilst I can't definitively say, I can take a wild guess. The evidence for my hypothesis lies in the old renders, back when this was supposed to release under the Fanstoys banner. We're of course going to avoid the first swing Fanstoys took at him, since I highly doubt any of that design's DNA remains in this version. That said, the 2019 version looks fairly close close to what we have today, but there are a few key differences. The side panels are larger, matching the toy slightly closer than the tune. The midriff isn't a faux part like the final version, also lining up closer with the toy. The head also makes a lot more sense here than it does on this more tune-styled body. Fitting with the half measures taken, it paints a pretty interesting picture of what might have happened. It shows a design that was meant to be a middle ground between the two styles, but then went through a metamorphosis when the designers realized fans were more enticed by accuracy than stylization, so they split the aesthetics, using parts that would lean hard into one style or another. This works really well for the toy design, since it in itself is a stylized version of said toy design, but it doesn't work for a 100% tune-accurate Soundwave. This is why I think people find the two versions so off. They're taking half measures to try and appease everyone, and it's not particularly working. That being said, I don't particularly see this as a reason to never try this system of play again. Don't forget, I've covered a successful example on this channel before with Iron Factory Megatron. That figure was able to balance 4 different robot modes and all worked damn well. The problem with Soundwave is that the part swapping doesn't change the overall design enough. Perhaps changing the waist and adding more extensive shoulders would have made it acceptable. I see this more as a first attempt at a really good idea for Masterpiece going forward. At the moment, Transformers figures are stuck in this idea of being 100% accurate to one specific version of the character. But what if they didn't have to be? What if, instead of a billion pieces that do nothing in the grand scheme of things, we got a few choice parts to change the character into its Marvel comic or toy appearance? People often argue about certain designs being the definitive version of a character, but it's hard to call something that when different people want different aesthetics. Why not do what every other action figure line does and offer alternate options for different preferences? Will official and unofficial companies ever do this? Probably not. It's far better financially to release a toy version years after, forcing people who didn't expect it to come out into double dipping. Nevertheless, I see potential in this system of play. I see how it's been done on a small scale damn well before, and I see how it's possible to scale that up onto larger figures. We're not at the stage where it should be implemented across all Masterpiece figures yet, but if it was on every Masterpiece figure, I'd be much more into that scale. That said, putting the could-be's aside and discussing what is, even with the aesthetic looking slightly off, it doesn't detract from his good points. He's still painted well, built solidly, and jointed exquisitely. If you're looking for a tune-style Soundwave, he's slightly boring, but ultimately a safe bet. I still think Takara's going to eventually release a Soundwave 2.0 later down the line, since their current sales have apparently been really good in Japan, but I'm not sure I can recommend waiting for that version given their abysmal track record. If I'm wrong and it never comes out, or if I'm right and it ends up being a steaming pile, this will likely be a solid alternative. And if you're like me, who went in on this for the toy stylings, well, this might just be the best Soundwave on the market. Yes, it's probably by default since the original MP hasn't aged the best. Stop kidding yourself, those hips are wacky as f. But he's still fantastic on his own thanks to his smooth engineering and insane joint design, and he's absolutely a must-have if you're on the same wavelength as me. He's essentially the perfect toy-styled Soundwave, and that may end up causing problems for the tune side of things, but I cannot deny how awesome this looks. If you're not going to engage with the toy pieces, maybe think it over for a bit. But if you are, and are willing to hand over the cash for it, you need this in your life. He's expensive, but you see where all that money went. There's basically nothing I can say that would turn toy fans off. Well, except for Frenzy. Yeah, I think I might have just found the worst cassette in my collection. At least the G1 cassettes had their own derpy charm to them. This just doesn't. The head sculpt is pretty much the only good thing about it. It's expressive, it's painted really well, and they even give you 3 options, which is greatly appreciated. That's pretty much all there is to praise though, because everything below is an absolute show. The torso is painted pretty well, or at least better than the cassette mode, but the detail itself is so flat and washed out. Yes, this is a cassette, so it's going to be a little flat, but the Masterpiece version wasn't that bad. The Masterpiece also didn't have shoulders low enough to give Hotshot a headache. They're really thin too for some reason. I suppose the articulation is alright, it's definitely above the level of his predecessor, but the tolerances aren't doing it any favors. The shoulders are way too tight, and my copy got f***ed over by the QC gremlin, so one hip is as loose as your And why the f*** are the legs so thin and long? Why's he got these spaghetti-ass shins? We're not trying to make Cassette carbonara here. And once again, paint chipping on the tapographs. Great job, stupid. The feet stink, barely adding enough surface detail to the damn thing to keep the robot upright. And worst of all, they didn't calibrate the knee mechanism properly. The diecast has the potential to buckle during the casting process, and some people's legs need modification, otherwise they won't transform properly. I don't know what kind of modification specifically, but apparently it affects most copies on the market. I just got insanely lucky with this one, which makes sense. My bad luck was saved for Premium Finish Prime. Not even the pile drivers can save this thing. Sure, they clip on better, but thanks to the lack of arm tabs, they're always flopping around. They also have this really awful red paint on them, looking closer to red candy than a metallic finish. Guess that's where the mysterious second shade of red came from with the gun though. Honestly, owning both molds, I can safely say the Masterpiece version beats this in every way. Yes, even the materials, because although it doesn't have any die cast, at least it doesn't buckle and f with the transformation thanks to amateurish molding techniques. The only potential reason for getting the Fanstoys ones over the Hasbro versions is the size, and I don't just mean in terms of compatibility. They're a bit bigger and consequently slightly more Sunbow accurate in their scale. Not all the way, but definitely closer. Still, as a toy, this thing stinks. If I had to score this itself, I'd easily give it a 2. Seriously regretting not putting this on the worst of 2021 list. It's basically Maverick all over again. Oh well, I guess I'll have to give that spot to his brother, who's honestly just as bad. In fact, all of these cassettes stink. Don't buy these, save your money, they are not worth the price of admission. To be honest though, who the cares? Yes, the cassettes are shit, but the core robot has too many good qualities to deny this release's brilliance. The engineering is endlessly enjoyable. The robot mode goes from a little wonky looking but well built to gorgeous and well built, depending on which aesthetic you're looking for. If I were more into the toon stylings than the toy ones, maybe I'd rate this lower, but as I'm partial to the dumpiness of the old microchange fellow, in my eyes this is a truly fantastic figure. I really hope this acts as a blueprint for what third-party companies can do in the future. Sure, it may not be the best handled in terms of aesthetic swapping, but it shows that it is possible. Hell, we've seen the possibilities fully realized before, so I know it can be done. It's time to stop accepting the process of waiting for another version that may not even potentially come out. It's time to respect the fandom's diversity and preferences, and open up sales to a multitude of people. I know the chances of this being adopted are incredibly slim, but this, to me, is way more consumer-friendly than anything the niche is doing so far. I know these figures have their limitations, but in time, maybe those can be pushed. Maybe the barriers can be broken through, but well, that will likely never happen. Companies would rather either force you into one aesthetic or push you into double dipping. Such is the world we live in. Greed trumps all. But well, as always, fan and public consciousness is a conversation, so drop your thoughts on the potential of part swapping in the future below. Do you think Transformers has the potential to implement this system of play? Would you like to see this on more figures, and would it be worth the extra cost? And as always, remember, there's a context for everything. Till next time.